And 1, 2, 3, we are live with the Oregon Grape. I'm Eli Doyle, and we are joined in the studio by Lily Morgan and Jay Meredith. Thank you for being here, guys.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we're happy to have you. This petition stuff, that's the kind of the main thing we're going to be covering here, and it's interesting stuff. People are interested in it. People have been driving downtown and seeing the signs, and there's always two sides to a story, and we want to make sure that we're kind of giving everybody a voice there. So,
yeah, I'd like to. Yeah, thanks again for the invite to the OG. I'd like to compliment all four of you that in the very first episode that you did. I was impressed by the the homework and the time that you spent looking into it, and I was appreciative of hearing what you guys thought about it. There's a couple of things that we're hoping to clear up because, like you said, there's two sides to every story. So,
of course,
looking forward to explaining the other side that you haven't necessarily heard yet.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting is that really is a compliment, because even after reviewing it and learning more, and I wish that we would have done even more research. It was kind of rushed, honestly. We had sort of given us a deadline to do that episode, and so we were just like, all the guys like, hey, these are the things, research them, see what you can find out. And as with all things after the fact, it's like the more you research, the more you want to learn. And the whole idea here is like, it's, I feel like the idea of being unbiased is like, it's a hard thing to live up to, because if you, like, one of the things that I say is that the only way to be truly unbiased is to have no moral or ethical code at all, just to flip-flop with whatever comes your way, So everyone's unbiased, or everyone is biased, but that doesn't mean that you can't be objective and have this like dedication to finding out the truth of any subject. So that's kind of the vision for the Oregon Grape, and that's also just why I appreciate you guys being here and being willing to share about this type of stuff.
Excellent.
Yeah. So if we could do kind of just brief interviews for the audience here, if Lily, if you want to start just a little bit about yourself, your history, and how you kind of got into the different governmental positions that you've held, and just how you got your start, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, my name is Lily Morgan. I was born here in Grants Pass and have lived here the majority of my life. I moved away to go to college in Seattle, stayed a couple years working downtown Seattle, and then moved back home. I started working as a 911 dispatcher when I came home for the city of Grants Pass. We dispatched for sheriff, for ambulance, fire,
what an
and the
intense
police.
job, by the way, just to interrupt you for a second.
Yeah.
I mean, getting the most desperate calls, like, I mean, wow.
You only talk to people in their
exterior.
worst moment.
Yeah, crazy.
And I was in the 911 center for 5 years. While doing that, I volunteered to be a sheriff's reserve deputy. So I would work a shift and then go get in uniform and go work patrol or cover in the jail. We did a lot of special events back then. We had a pretty robust reserve unit, and we would work events to raise the money to pay for our own unit. So we were not paid for out of the sheriff's budget.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because it's one of the things Chris Barnett was talking about, was bringing back the reserve program. Did you have a positive experience with that, being in the reserve program?
I did, and many of the full-time deputies started as reserves, but that is a decision of the sheriff, and it's not a decision the commissioners can make. So right now, you're finding that positions in emergency response that traditionally have been volunteer have been replaced with paid jobs. It's harder to get volunteers, and you can't depend on that. There was also a stipulation in the bargaining agreement with the sheriff's employees that full-time positions cannot be replaced by volunteers. And so as budget cuts went, the money that was in the reserve fund got swooped up and put into the full-time groups, and that was disbanded. They have volunteers in different capacities still that do vacation checks. They do handicap enforcement and different things like that, just as the city has an auxiliary group that is a volunteer group. But there's so many aspects of the county. I could probably talk to you for days on the county because it's a pretty special place.
Well,
but
if you remember when I first reached out to you, the petition was going on, but I had just wanted to give an interview with you just because of this kind of long history that you've had in the county and stuff. And as someone who's interested in government but knows that they don't really know a lot, honestly, this podcast is, in a weird way, it's just a passion project of me, is an excuse to learn more, know. And so I wanted to interview just because of your history. And so, Well,
and I just started off wanting to help, and I found that dispatching alone is hard because you don't get closure. Getting in uniform and going out and actually seeing what happened is a whole different story than what you hear on the phone call. But I took a switch a little bit, a career path change, and applied for parole and probation in 2005. And I worked there until I became a county commissioner. And parole and probation really was that opportunity to build long-term relationships with individuals that had made bad choices. And, then you get to the root of, okay, what are those things keeping you from going forward in life, and really problem solving and helping them get to the point of making decisions, hopefully that they would make decisions that change their lives and for the better. And it was an incredible opportunity because I realized that every single one of us mess up.
Yeah.
And somebody's given us grace in our life or given us another chance. And do we do that? And other times you need strict accountability. And there's some actions that it's like, no, that's a zero tolerance there.
Yeah.
So trying to find that balance of justice and mercy and trying to see people as humans in the midst of brokenness and everything else. And it's an incredible job. I was grateful to do it. While I was a parole and probation officer, I ran for city council in 2010. As one of the city councilors that replaced the 5 recalled counselors. So they were, there was a recall, 5 city councilors were recalled. There was an interim council, but the first election after that, I was elected.
Timeline-wise, this was during your time as a probation officer, but before your time as a county commissioner?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
So
one note on the probation officer job, by the way, is what a crazy job, because my thoughts on it is that it's probably no less difficult than any of those other positions as the reserve program or the 911 dispatcher, because I think of a 911 dispatcher as a very emotionally taxing job. But I feel as if maybe you can attest to this, the rewarding aspect of it is probably much more like actually getting to see these people change and do something for the better. And even though it's not the topic of this particular podcast, we just don't have the time, but I would love to hear your thoughts on the homelessness issue, because we're actually planning on doing a full-scale documentary on homelessness in Southern Oregon. I always think of homelessness as kind of this discussion between like having compassion, but also being practical on like what's the right decision. So anyways, just
I'd
my
be
thoughts
happy to
on that.
talk with you about that, especially with being able to be a part of the conversation of changing state law and the recriminalization or the pulling back Measure 110 and the impacts. But I've also been engaged with the mental health services in this community for a long time and a part of that. And, there are some that are involved in addiction. There's some that have mental health issues. There's others that have other situations that just find themselves there. But then there's some that are certainly needing held accountable, and allowing to continue in that behavior is not helpful. So where does compassion and humanity come in when you allow somebody to stay in that addiction on the streets?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of conversation there. I'd be happy to have that conversation with you later. But
so you took the position as city council after the recall, correctly? And then did you continue working as a probation officer before moving on to commissioner?
So parole and probation was my full-time job. And I was elected to be a city councilor. Our city council is not paid.
I was going to say, it's volunteer, isn't it?
It is. And you put in time between the committees that you're on. It's where I met Jay originally, because he was our finance director. And so served on city council a couple years, was council president. During that time, I went to grad school, got my master's in management, and that opened the door for me being promoted to the supervisor at parole and probation. And, got to the point that I was having to kind of juggle being the supervisor versus time for city council. And so I stepped down from city council at the end of in November 2015.
Okay.
And then opted to run for county commissioner 2016. So I got elected in November 2016 and took office in 2017.
So what was the inspiration for running for county commissioner? Did you just feel as if you could have done more than you were doing in city council, or?
Well, you find that different government entities have different authority and responsibilities. And a lot of what we were impacted by in the city was because of things happening at the county. And, we had gone from where there was so much chaos and distrust that 5 city councilors get recalled to 2.5 years later getting a charter change passed by the voters and building that trust back, addressing some things. We rented jail beds. We were able to show that arrests went down by 500 in the 6 months from before renting the jail beds to the 6 months after, where people were actually being held accountable. There was a lot of things going on there. If you think about the timeline of not just homelessness, but the jail reducing numbers, the decriminalization of recreational and everything else. There's a lot of things that all happened that people were coming to Josephine County because there was no jail, no cops, weed was legal and free.
Yep.
And, then you see this other stuff happen. So there's been this definite transition in the last 12 years in this community in a big way. And so going from city council, I felt like we'd kind of gotten things stable and in a good place. And the things that were still in great need was the struggle at the county. And so ran for county commissioner and worked on getting things more stable there. We got the first levy through to cover the jail for the sheriff's office and the juvenile justice. And that was 2017, that levy passed. And that was, we had people that were very supportive of law enforcement, and our criminal justice system were concerned about us running that levy. And it passed. It was the first one that passed since 1998 for the county. So that was a big deal, that 19 years of going along and trying to find other solutions. And we didn't just run a levy. We said, okay, where can we find other revenues? One of those promises with that levy was that the profits from the forestry department for the county would go back towards the criminal justice system. We also would take the revenues from marijuana and put that back into code enforcement and the juvenile system in some other ways. So we were trying to see where are those areas we had flexible spending that we can make sure to shore up what our most important thing is which is the safety of our community. And so getting that levy passed, using the profits of the forestry department, county forestry department, and all that, and committing it to the criminal justice system. At the time, we were renting 3 juvenile justice beds from Douglas County. And so they'd have somebody in there for a Measure 11 crime, and somebody would commit another Measure 11 crime, and they'd have to pick who to kick out to maintain those 3 beds.
Wow.
And then, with youth, the biggest thing is how do you come alongside and mentor and try to get something else going on, and that whole program.
Because when you're young, you're impressionable. There's almost like,
I'm still impressionable.
Yeah. Trust me, I feel more impressionable sometimes. The more that I realize I don't know things. But yeah, I feel like it would be really important to if someone young does make a mistake, well, let's jump on that, see if we can help them, before it spirals.
Well, and one thing that most people don't realize in our criminal justice system, everybody is, all the departments are elected officials for the most part, or have a different funding source. So the district attorney is elected, the sheriff is elected, these important positions, but then the juvenile is an appointed position. The community corrections director is an appointed position. And so there's, who's most important, who gets the funding? Well, often an elected official gets to vie for that more. And so you have to find balance in that system. So I was very fortunate to have a career that helped people, and to look for ways of removing barriers and moving forward. And I can see how that experience has lent towards helping me in elected life. So county commissioner, then I went from being in a county department as an employee to being, liaison to mental health and public health and juvenile and some of these other departments. And so now how do we put programs in place? And how do we do something different? One of the things I'm proudest of during that time was we created a program of school outreach officers, which were prevention certified staff into the junior highs and high school and all the county schools and Grants Pass High School. And the intention was to intervene and come alongside families before they went into delinquency.
Oh, okay.
And they called every student going into 6th grade and 9th grade and talked to every family and said, what are you looking forward to going into school this year? What are your concerns? And just seeing if they could address anything. And that program has continued. And that was, if we can keep our youth in school and get them through school, there's less likelihood of future criminality.
I do remember seeing statistics on that, on how that correlation between whether or not they graduated and whether or not they went on to not commit crime.
You'll hear two steps along the way. Are they reading by 3rd grade? And have they finished the 10th grade?
Yeah.
Those are 2 key designations for whatever reason of indicating a potential for future criminality. And so how do we help people get past that? So such a blessed career. And yeah, so from there I went on and served in the state legislature.
And could you remind me, did you serve 1 or 2 terms as a commissioner?
1 term, 4 years.
Just 1 term. Okay, that's what I thought.
And then I ran for state representative when Representative Carl Wilson decided not to run again. And
can you remind me how many representatives Oregon has?
Oregon has 60 state representatives and 30 senators. So the way Oregon is, not every state is the same. Within each Senate district are 2 House districts. And so you have basically a sister or a partner House district that you share a senator with.
Okay.
And so Senate District 2 covers Josephine County. And my position was the only one fully in Josephine County. All the other representatives, when I started, there were 4 representatives that had a piece of Josephine County.
Interesting.
And then my second term was after redistricting, after the caucus, and we had 2 that covered Josephine County. But my position was the traditional grants pass position that was only in Josephine County.
What was your experience as a state representative? Was it mostly a positive experience? Were you able to accomplish things that you were looking to get done, or?
It was some of the most horrifying things I've seen, and some of the most accomplishing in other
and this
ways.
is coming from the 911 dispatcher.
Yeah,
and,
yeah. You know, there was definitely experiences. I mean, I had the opportunity to go into, prison and see hospice patients in the prison, and as you're seeing that their medical system inside the prison is from the 50s. And so you're like, okay, we can maybe do better there. But also that accountability of you made a decision that took somebody's life or did something else, and where's the justice for the victims? And so as a freshman, I was placed on the Judiciary Committee. That's not common, but
they were probably aware of your history.
I was the only legislator out of 90 that had a background in parole and probation, and so had a different perspective. Several were retired law enforcement from police and stuff like that, but I was the only one with parole and probation background. But I served on the Housing Committee. I served on the Behavioral Health Committee and the Wildfire Recovery Committee. And also they had another committee called Civil Law. And it was.
Is this some of the common responsibilities for a state representative? Is that you get assigned to these different committees to handle different areas? And do you mainly handle issues throughout the counties that you're coming from, or are these state issues that you're working with?
It's state laws, and so you bring the voice from where you come from, but the laws are impacting everybody.
I suppose that's the point behind it, anyways, is that you're making sure that you're representing your county, but you're now dealing with state issues. Yeah.
Well, and I remember a time that there was a bill coming through the Housing Committee that I thought would hurt us in Southern Oregon. And I reached out to Representative Pam Marsh, who's a different political party out in Ashland. And I said, look, this is how this will impact Southern Oregon. And she helped me fight it. And we were able to kill that bill at the time. That doesn't always happen that way. But you try to say, all right, from Southern Oregon perspective, how is this going to impact us? But, my freshman year, I got an omnibus bill through as a chief sponsor, which was House Bill 3000, that changed how the cannabis industry was being looked at and hemp and stuff like that. And trying to bring opportunity to get more support for our sheriff down here with dealing with the illicit at a time when everything in cannabis is legal. You need to support the legal ventures and hold accountable the illicit.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So trying to find that balance. And I asked the question, do we need to bring back the regulations for those that are doing it, or do you have to increase the regulations? Where's that balance? But the illicit cannabis industry was completely undermining everything else going on, and including the safety of our community. The sheriff would be in my committee testifying to the violence that was going along with some of the grows that he was investigating and incidences. And we're talking major crimes: murder, kidnapping, rape, assault.
There was actually one on my street. There was an illegal cannabis grow, and someone, I don't know if there was actual murder. There was an attempted murder. Someone got shot at. Yeah.
Well, and definitely some big stuff there. But then, what's happening here in Josephine County, we were testifying to, and as it was going on in the legislature, and got that bill through, and then some follow-up the next couple of years. So yeah, I was able to get several bills through, which is not necessarily common, but then there was certainly other fights that we tried to make that we made no headway on.
Yeah.
And that's frustrating.
I feel like it happens a lot,
There's not an equal amount of people in the parties.
Yeah.
So when you have a super majority that they can pass things without you voting and doing different things, it's certainly frustrating. And the transition of where society is in the last couple of years is just tipped.
It's getting harder.
And then how people are interacting with each other and treating people. And if you don't agree 100%, council culture and the pressure of pleasing everybody and having some image out there, and very much emotionally driven. And as a whole, we've forgotten how to be kind. We've forgotten how to take responsibility for our actions. When you make a mistake, you own it and you move on and you keep going. There's a lot of things that we're not seeing necessarily in our society anymore in the last couple of years. And you're seeing it through our youth. You're seeing it through our economy. You're seeing it through just TV.
Yeah.
What you're seeing in politics is not new.
Yeah.
But what is new is social media, that it's right in front of your face instantly.
It's happened very quick, and it's a little bit overwhelming. Sometimes it feels like drinking from a fire hose. So as a state rep, when you finished out your term, did you run for re-election? And when did your first term end?
Senators served for 4 years, representatives served for 2. So I was serving in my second term. So the idea of our legislature was created that it's supposed to be a citizen legislature. You go to Salem for 6 months, and then you go home and you stay home for 18 months and you work your normal job. Through time, that has changed. Now there's a short session in the even-numbered years that you go for 35 days, and every 2-3 months you have legislative days, and you got to take a week and go back to Salem. And so it used to be a job that was temporary, and then you go have your real life. It's turned into almost a full-time job where the amount of constituents are wanting meetings, and you're following up the stuff and regular ongoing committee requirements. And you have to try to have other jobs while you come home, and it's very challenging to do that. So for me, I had been looking at teaching at the college level before I left, and then COVID happened and every enrollment went down. All the hiring stopped for a bit. So I got my CDL and was a substitute school bus driver. So I would get up at 4:30 in the morning and drive school bus.
That must have been a nice change, or a nice little break,
And I'd get off around 9:30 and then go do my legislative work until the afternoon, and then go back out, run routes, and do evening meetings.
Wouldn't that be crazy as like a kid on a school bus? Like, aren't you our state rep? Like,
I had that. Yeah, definitely had that. So
it's like, I'd like to talk to you about some policies, actually, if you don't mind, while we're driving here. No. That's crazy.
Well, and then I also taught driver's ed, because you get to the summer, there's no work. And so I got certified to teach driver's ed. And so you're working 2-3 jobs to keep ends, or, I can't think straight, to make the bills be paid. And so then this second session, though, getting out of the long session, there was a lot going on. I had actually got hired to teach critical thinking at Southern Oregon University and was getting ready to start. And I got invited to go to Portugal as part of the Measure 110, looking at the impacts of decriminalization of hard drugs. And then a group wanted to go to Portugal and see how great it is. And I said, who's going that's going to say it's not great? And I got to be that voice. I got to go and say, wait, this is how we're different. This is how it's not working. It was shocking to me that when we asked what the average age of the people that were going to their methadone clinic every day, and they said 47, 48. Well, I turned 48 while I was on that trip. So this is my generation. This is my age group. And I said, why do you think that is? And they said, they started using in the 90s and then never stopped. And in Portugal, the goal isn't that people stop using. That alone was enough for me to say, I don't want the Portugal model.
Yeah.
I don't want people trapped in addiction the rest of their life. I want them to have a successful life, that they're living and they're thriving and not looking for that next high or looking for that next thing to get them through.
Well, that ties into the homeless stuff too, because I mean, the thing is, I don't even really look at it as a homeless problem as much as I look at it as a drug problem. I mean, we're right here in the city, this studio, and I see people by all the time, and it's very rarely that someone that I see camping or hanging outside is not visibly a user.
The criminal justice system, though I do not agree that being an addict is a crime, the ability to have a speed bump in your life long enough to pause and say, the accountability of the criminal justice system can help you pause long enough to get off the high and say, do you want help?
Yeah.
Do you want to go another path? And let's get you that help.
I've heard stories of people where they said that getting arrested was the changing point in their life, Yeah,
I've heard that too. So anyhow, I ended up not teaching at SOU. But I was offered, I was asked to apply for a job as a city manager in Gold Hill. I ended up going that route. I applied and got hired, and I've been there about 10 months now. So
Okay.
there's a really long story of an intro.
It is, but it was brilliant, and I'm glad that we got the full background there. And Jay, I'm going to let you kind of take the mic now. All that I know about you, Jay, is that you worked as the finance director for the city. Did you start private sector? Have you worked other government jobs?
Yeah, so I've been a CPA for about 24 years now. That's my profession.
Okay. Can I actually ask a quick question before you go on? What is the difference between a finance director and a treasurer? Because I have never known the difference. I just know they're both dealing with money.
They have similar responsibilities. So the finance director, like in the county's environment. So in the city's environment, I was the city's finance director, and basically the city's finance director encompassed basically everything that the county treasurer does and the county finance director. My job at the city was kind of both of those wrapped into one. So I would oversee where the cash reserves were invested. I would oversee the accounting, putting together the annual budget, et cetera. So at the county level, the county treasurer handles primarily tax collections and investing the county's tax receipts and investing those dollars and making sure those dollars are kept safe and collecting and then remitting those dollars, because the county acts as a tax collector for all of the property tax agencies in Josephine County. So the school district, the city of Grants Pass, the special districts like the library district, the county. When you pay your property taxes, it all goes to Josephine County, and then Josephine County disperses those receipts out to all the different agencies that have a little share of those tax numbers.
In that position, do you have influence over how the money is spent?
You not directly, but it's the responsibility of the finance director to establish or to advise on good financial policies, and to, like in my case, I worked with the city council for 10 years. I was the city's finance director for 10 years, and I would recommend certain courses of action to them, and ultimately it's the city council that makes the final decisions and adopts the final budget. But it's the responsibility of the finance director to recommend policies and put the recommended budget together in a way where the budget is sustainable and the agency stays fiscally healthy.
Okay, brilliant. That was 10 years that you were working as the finance director?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow, that's crazy. Is it an elected position?
No, it's not. It's an appointed position.
Okay.
So that's where Lily and I originally met.
Okay.
And we, it's the whole law enforcement and how do you fund law enforcement. That's actually why we're here, and why we're here to talk about the recall petition for Commissioner John West. And
of course, yeah.
It's really, it kind of goes back to the public safety and some decisions that are being made that are negatively affecting the county and are negatively affecting law enforcement and public safety as well. So, but anyways, I've spent about half of my career in the private sector and half of my career in government. So I actually worked for the city of Grants Pass for 12 years.
Which one was more fun?
If
you can use such a word in government work.
when I was in college, I took every accounting class there was except nonprofit and
You're not one of those people who's like naturally good at math, are you?
I'm pretty good at math.
That just blows my mind though. Like I have a friend who like she's like tutors at like RCC, and the stuff she talks about, I'm like, listen, you give me like a paintbrush, you want me to write a story, I could do that. I'll go through history books, love that. You put a number in front of my brain, it's like shuts down fog. Yeah, so good for you just for that skill.
if the number has a dollar sign next to it, I'm pretty good at that.
Okay, cool.
Anyway,
awesome.
So yeah, I've been a CPA for almost 24 years. So I spent half of my professional career in government and half in the private sector. So I was in private sector before working for the city of Grants Pass. I actually moved a small business here to Grants Pass 18 years ago. And then I ended up, when I shut that business down, it was a successful business, but I ended up making a career change, and there just happened to be a job position open in the finance department for the city of Grants Pass. And it's like, well, I live here. I'll give that a shot.
Yeah.
I never thought I would work. When I was in college, I took every accounting class there was except governmental and nonprofit accounting, and it's a different animal doing accounting and budget work for a governmental agency. But I picked it up pretty quick once I joined the City of Grants Pass, and there was a big management and council shakeup shortly after I joined Grants Pass. It had nothing to do with me, but there were five of 8 city council members were recalled from office because.
Is that what you were talking about, Lily? That same recall?
Citizens were unhappy about some things that were going on at the time, and then
and you're like, I just do the math. Don't look at me. No,
it was. I thought working in government was going to be a little bit dull. Yeah. But I found the opposite was true. It was like, wow, this is crazy, exciting environment, and there's all kinds of crazy things going on. And I could write a book about the first couple of years that I worked for the City of Grants Pass because so much crazy stuff was going on. And we set a first in Oregon for recalling an entire quorum of city council. Wow. Because the citizens were just unhappy about things that were going on. And
they're like, we don't just want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We want to throw the tub out. We're going to get rid of the house. We're going to burn it. No, I'm just kidding.
And the City of Grants Pass is a city manager form of government. So that means that your council members are part-time volunteer. They're unpaid, which is different than how the county operates. But I worked for 4 different, including interim managers. I worked for 4 different city managers in my first 4 years there. There was just a lot of crazy things going on. And finally, our current city manager, he's been there since 2012, and so he's been there for 12 years now, which is a pretty long run for a city manager. But
what's the difference between a city manager and a mayor, if I can just ask a dumb question?
Yeah, so we have a weak. You could say a weak mayor form of government or a city manager form of government, which, so in our case, and every city works a little bit differently. So in the case, the city charter is kind of like the constitution for the city, and the county charter is like the constitution for the county. It's how the government is set up. It's the basic rules that, govern how the agency is to operate. So in the City of Grants Pass's case, the mayor is more of a political figurehead. The charter says that the mayor is kind of like the political, politically in charge. So the mayor sets the agenda. The mayor runs the meetings, but the mayor doesn't even get to vote on anything in front of the city council unless there's a tie. If there's like a 4-4 tie, the mayor then will break the tie one way or the other. But the mayor doesn't even get to vote on issues in front of the city council. So, anyways. When I joined the city, and even when I first moved here to Grants Pass 18 years ago, the first thing, I had a neighbor that was a firefighter. The first thing that I talked to him about, there was a big bond issue. That's when Grants Pass voted to build our new fire stations, the one out on Parkway, and there was a training tower built at Hillcrest Station, and the new Redwood area fire station was built. So that was a bond measure, and I got to know my neighbor who was a firefighter. And when I joined the City of Grants Pass, I realized how uncertain the finances were, because we had to go before voters every 3 or 4 years to get a levy approved just to keep operating our police and fire departments. And so I became really familiar with the funding mechanisms of how police, fire, law enforcement are funded. And then when in 2012, Josephine County lost a lot of federal funding that used to support law enforcement.
When did you leave the finance director position, by the way?
2020, so it was 4 years ago. Okay, cool. So I've been...
So this was like 2 years into your role as finance director or so, right?
Yeah, so about 2 years into my role as finance director, the county lost a lot of its federal funding. And there's a long story there that we don't necessarily need to go into today. Sure. But that's when a bunch of people were let out of the jail because we had to cut back on the jail budget. The juvenile justice was closed down, almost entirely closed down, other than renting a few beds in a neighboring county. And then that was shortly after the recall and shortly after Lily joined the council. So it was all about the same time. But in 2012, a bunch of community leaders got together and said, this is not acceptable. We can't go without law enforcement in Josephine County. That's just not a recipe for a healthy community. So a bunch of community leaders got together. There was probably 40 or 50 people in the room, and we had a series of strategic planning sessions that was actually led by Travis Boersma,
Oh,
Dutch
interesting.
Brothers.
Yeah.
And, because he's led a very successful business over the years. He's good at strategic
Well, and obviously
planning.
the decisions of the decision are relevant to him. It's where he operated. It's where he started his business. Yeah.
He's a very community-minded, community-oriented individual as well, and been very supportive of, law enforcement and other community beneficial things over the years. And so we got together. I think Lily was part of some of those initial sessions as well, but somehow, so we ended up forming a new nonprofit agency that was its primary mission was to help Josephine County get back on its feet, and primarily the law enforcement programs get back on its feet. So we went through a number of different things and over the years, and I found myself, somehow I ended up being the president and chair of this new nonprofit organization. And so I worked with a lot of people over the years to try to rebuild Josephine County. And
the intention of this nonprofit organization was essentially what, to refund law enforcement, or?
Well, it's the mission statement. I still remember it because we said it so often. It was a citizen voice plan for a secure, stable, and sustainable Josephine County. But the bottom line is we were working to rebuild our law enforcement programs, because that's where the funding cutbacks hit all law enforcement and justice programs. So we had, even though it was county programs that lost their funding, had a huge impact on the city of Grants Pass. So when a city police officer can't, arrest somebody and they can't take them to jail, or there's no prosecutor in the district attorney's office to prosecute somebody when they break the law.
There's an additional burden on the sheriffs, or
the law enforcement system just doesn't work. Okay. So we were having police officers in the city of Grants Pass where they would have to give somebody a ticket, even for something really bad that you would normally be taken to jail for. They were giving people tickets, and the people were tearing up the tickets in front of them, and because there's no, when there's no jail to take them to and nobody to prosecute them, I mean, it was just really, really bad. And we had downtown business owners, and just everybody from the community was up in arms. You have to fix this.
Yeah.
So Lily actually led the charge for the city to rent some jail beds to get a little bit more funding back into the criminal justice system, and I helped create Oregon's first jail services utility fee to help pay for that service, because our police officers can't do their job effectively if they can't take somebody to jail when they break the law.
Of course not.
And so,
this nonprofit organization you started, did you guys start to see that? And we'll want to move on pretty soon here, but did you start to see your guys' numbers improve as far as criminality and things? Did you actually start to see the tangible results after you started implementing these programs?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Once our police officers had the ability to take somebody to jail when they broke the law, it had a big impact.
I would say that's a pretty big, I'd say that's an important thing to be able to enforce the law.
It made a big difference.
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact number. I want to say it was like 18 or 29. It was one of those random numbers, but fugitives, people that were here hiding with warrants from other places.
Yeah.
That when law enforcement would contact them, they'd get a ticket for their warrant and be released. Well, when we started renting jail beds, every one of them were held and then sent away.
Yeah.
And so all these people that all of a sudden, had sought refuge here to hide from justice where they were from,
suddenly it wasn't such a good place to do that.
Correct.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, that's good. Yeah, no, that sounds like it was a much needed change that needed to happen within the city. That's great that you got to work on that.
Yeah. So I say all that because starting in 2012, when we first started that nonprofit organization, I started watching all of the county commissioner meetings. So, and being that I was the finance director, I had to attend all the city council meetings. So for the last 12 years, I have watched or listened to every single public meeting of the county commissioners and every single city council meeting as well. And so
it is interesting how it's almost like a bug you catch, like I said, this podcast was kind of an excuse to learn more. And it's kind of like once you start to get involved, it is a little bit exciting and you want to learn more and you're like, hey, is this a good decision for the community? So yeah, I get why you did that. Yeah.
Yeah. So bringing, I had to pay attention to everything that was going on, both at the county level and the city level. Cause one of my goals in my extracurricular activities, so to speak, was to try to help the county get back on its feet. And so I've watched a lot of commissioners and a lot of the challenges that both the city and the county have dealt with over the years. And we've made a lot of progress in the last 12 years as well. Starting 2017 is when the biggest amount of progress made. That's when, as Lily mentioned, we passed our first levy to help fund the jail and juvenile justice. So that was a countywide levy. So everybody in the city and the county is paying for that because everybody uses that, the jail and juvenile justice. And then, as time goes on, we're able to, I say we, but it's kind of a collective effort. Really, it's the men and women that work in the sheriff's office that really made the biggest amount of difference, because they took what was a pretty minimal amount of funding and a minimal amount of resources, and every time they got a little bit more resources, they used it wisely, and they built up trust with the community. And the sheriff's office has done an amazing job in the last 12 years and getting back on its feet. And because of their success, they finally got a new law enforcement district approved just in November of last year, and that's actually the main reason why I decided to get involved in this recall effort. And so that's a story we'll get into.
Yeah.
We'll get into
that's
briefly,
that's a good lead in. And kind of some of the things that I wanted to ask too is if you guys watched the John West interview, you remember that I had kind of asked John about what his personal experience with you guys was. And so I'd love to ask if we could start with you, Lily Morgan, just what was your experience with John as a when you were a commissioner? Because what I had been told was that he was fairly critical of you and some of the decisions that you were making, and there was even like a little bit of this rumor that this was like your payback to get back at him or whatever. And so would you like to speak to a little bit about your guys' relationship prior to this recall as well as during your time as a commissioner?
Absolutely. So I have not watched your other interviews.
That's
so
okay.
You'll have to.
I'll forgive you.
I first met John at a fundraiser before I was elected. He told me he was into forestry and mining, and I'm like, great. I defend natural resources, and I believe in using our land, and that it's a renewable resource. And so hadn't really seen him after that again. Kind of knew who he was. And then in 2018, I came into my office one day, and my office was ransacked, literally. My papers were thrown around, my pictures were knocked over, decorations were thrown about. My mom had sent me flowers a couple days before. It looked like someone had taken a tennis racket to it. And my office looked like a bomb went off. And I quickly cleaned it up because the staff had put an appointment on my calendar for 11 o'clock with John West, and I had no idea what it was about. Barely remember who he was. And had 7 minutes between the first meeting and the second, and when that appointment to just get it cleaned up real quick. And so, you're just kind of like shaking a little bit when your office is in a locked area in the county courthouse, and you come in and it's destroyed like that. And so John comes in, it's like, well, what can I do for you? And he goes, well, you have 10 days to quit, or we're going to file a recall against you. And I said, well, who's we? And he said, that's not for you to know. I said, can I ask why? And he listed off a list of reasons. And he said, so what's your decision? I said, well, you've given me a lot to pray about. Thank you. And it was kind of just that. Wasn't much of a conversation. As he went to step out the door, he said, wait till you see what we have for Public Works. And the items he had listed as reasons were things that I had heard over the previous year.
Do you recall any of them?
I don't remember this, all of the specifics, but each month there would be a new rumor about me that Simon would be telling people in the community. And it was the accumulation of all of those rumors was the list. And so I had an idea Simon was involved with it. And then when John came before the commissioners to give his Public Works presentation, he word for word gave Simon's plan that Simon had been speaking of behind the scenes, that he wanted to fire the Public Works director, wanted to outsource engineering, wanted to hire an engineer to be the Public Works director. And it never really went anywhere, but he presented that plan. And then, through the course of the summer, basically I'd be notified that he had put in public information requests, but we had no interaction. So I didn't.
Apart from that meeting that first time?
Correct.
Okay.
So we didn't interact. Every once in a while, I remember I was at an event for veterans and somebody asked me about it, and I said, well, we'll see. The recall never got filed. They never started collecting signatures. It just kind of dissipated. And so then as I went to run for re-election or run for state rep, John started doing a lot of ads against me and was pretty critical in the ads. And I would say that, so along the way, John would put in public information requests. And he would get a piece of information, and then he would come up with a story about that information, of which wasn't true. Or a piece of it would be true, but the story around it that he created was not.
Do you remember any of these kind of stories or the narratives he was giving in the ads?
Oh, there's a lots of them, and we could probably talk a whole show just on that. Okay. When it comes down to it, it was easy for him to make up a narrative of what he wanted to do, but I moved forward and got elected and kept working to serve. I will tell you, 2018 was a tough year, and that year there was a report that there was going to be an ethics complaint against me. It didn't get filed, but I went through the process of gathering the information after legal counsel told me that it was going to be there.
2018, I'm getting a little lost in the timeline. Were you a state rep at that time, or were you still working as a commissioner?
Commissioner.
Okay.
So there was going to be an ethics complaint in February. In March, the Oregon Department of Justice showed up, stated they were conducting a criminal investigation of me. And then in April, John said he was going to do the recall. And then at the end of the year, there was a bully complaint against me by the Human Resources Director. To say the least, it was a challenging year and an opportunity to kind of seek my faith and try to find a way to get through all the accusations and everything going on. In the end, the ethics complaint didn't get filed. The recall didn't get filed. The criminal investigation, they did not press charges. I learned the sheriff is who filed the complaint. The bully complaint was dismissed. And all of these complaints and all these agencies are agencies that like to hold elected officials accountable. And if they have anything, they're going to throw the book at you. And for the most part, it didn't go anywhere. So until 2 years later when I'm running for election and there's a lot of ads. And so instead of addressing the ads, I just kept trying to speak to the positive of what I'd done in the job and ran for election. So fast forward 2 years, John's running for election, and he and Brian D. LaGrange are the two finalists. And John's team reached out to me and asked for a meeting. They said that he was having some difficulty. People were upset with how he had treated me in the election 2 years before. So he asked for a meeting. So I said, I'll meet with you only if there's witnesses. And so that we met, and he basically said, you were in my way and you hadn't done anything wrong, but I waged war on you and threw everything at you, every missile I had.
His way, in what way?
Goals for other things. He didn't ever specify.
Business goals or political goals?
He didn't specify.
Okay.
He just said I was in his way. And at the end of it, I thanked him, and he said, I'm sorry. And then he left. And I stayed out of that election. The hardest thing for me to go through that year was not somebody saying they were going to recall me. The hardest thing was going through the criminal investigation, where I'd served most of my adult life in the criminal justice system, and to have my integrity and honesty questioned and have, a felony investigation against me was certainly challenging. Well, in October of 2020, a month before I got elected to state representative, the sheriff called me, the sheriff who filed the investigation with the Department of Justice against me. And he said, you're going to get elected. I'm going to vote for you, and I need your help. And I had a choice to make at that moment. What do I do? Do I say, forget it? You put me through the ringer. Why would I work with you? But this is our sheriff, and I'm going to be elected to a state office. And so I said, what do you need? And he's who brought the concern to me that people were growing illicit cannabis under the guise of a hemp license or not with a hemp license at all. And he wanted help dealing with that.
It's funny because that's something I wondered about, because we were involved in the hemp industry as well. And I wondered about how much of that was going on as people growing marijuana under a hemp license. Because I remember the rules and the testing and stuff. It was pretty strict. You had a government official come out and test it and all that. So there actually was a fair bit of that.
excessive.
Interesting.
Absolutely. But, we're trying to think through the options. I met with the district attorney and the county legal counsel and the sheriff, and the four of us were trying to brainstorm and ran a bill to, that if you have a hemp license, you have to be inspected, something like that. And it fell flat on its face, but it started a conversation that led to other doors that led to House Bill 3000, which was an omnibus bill that updated the Farm Bill, hemp regulations. It updated all these other kinds of things. And had we not started with the sheriff and I working together and him bringing Sheriff Sickler on board. And
was Dave Daniel at the time? Sheriff Dave Daniel, is that who was in there?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Dave is as far as I am aware, the first 3-term sheriff we've had in Josephine County.
Interesting, yeah.
But anyhow, I just opted to do my job because that's who I am. And I will say, as a Christian, it's one of those things that you have to learn to let go and forgive people, because otherwise it eats you up. Mm-hmm. And so with John, I stayed out of the election when he ran for office for the most part. I mean, if people ask me questions, but I didn't get involved. I didn't go on an attack or try to be retaliatory, and I certainly wasn't looking to be retaliatory here. Mm-hmm. This isn't something that I sought out. I had a group come to me and ask me to be the chief petitioner. And I had to weigh that in the balance. I had to kind of speak through that. And I said, people are going to say I'm just being retaliatory. But in the end, really what freed me up to do it is that I'm not seeking a job in Josephine County, that I don't work in this county, but I live here. Mm-hmm. And I've served in that role, and I know what it's supposed to be. So when the evidence of what was going on in the commissioner's office and by John, it was egregious to me that all the work that I had done in the 4 years preceding to build up the county and to get the funding in place to shore up criminal justice system and to bring a healthy mental health program that integrated and had an emergency response with the police department and all these other relationships and partnerships, to get that in place and to have somebody who now was doing things to benefit himself or business partners, or to do things that were illegal, or to twist the law, to use county resources for personal gain.
Did you feel pretty confident in that assessment of his behavior? Like, you really felt like there was a selfish aim behind it? Was that like pretty apparent when you started kind of researching all these things? Because I just know, because I've been researching it, and it's actually been hard for me to find the areas that he has benefited personally.
Okay, we can speak to that.
Yeah.
And part of it, though, is you'll have people tell you things that have happened, or give you an example of something that's happened and said, can you go on the record and do that? People are terrified of retaliation. Mm-hmm. They are terrified that they'll go after them. You know how many people have come to us and said, I want to sign the petition, but I'm afraid they're going to find out because my spouse works at the county or something else like that. And quite frankly, there have been threats to other candidates made, and they're afraid to say it because who's going to believe them? But when you are seeing for the first time money play into the politics in Josephine County at such a level that it's intimidating to other people. But so first and foremost, I was working my job. I was doing that. I'm hearing of things going on, but I'm encouraging people to turn it into through the channels. Call the Ethics Commission. Mm-hmm. Call whoever you need to call to report that in. That's illegal behavior. He needs held accountable, but I was staying out of it. And until a group came to me and said, Lily, we would like you to be the chief petitioner. And I brought up the concern about that they think of that. And but at the same time, I realized I wasn't afraid of the bullying. I knew that whoever was going to be the chief petitioner, they were going to do a character assassination of. And they were going to come up with anything they can say or do to attack that person. And I'd already been through that. So what more could they say of me that isn't already out there? Mm-hmm. And at this point,
what I heard is that you wear funny glasses and you suck at playing guitar. So that's some of the attacks I heard. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Well, let me. I
do wear glasses
no,
to read.
Your glasses are lovely. Your glasses are lovely. No, I'm just making a joke.
And let me get to your question about personal gain. That's actually not our primary concern. Mm-hmm. The overall concern, and the reason I can, as one of just several people that got involved in putting this petition together.
Yeah.
the overall reason is the decisions that Commissioner West is making is trying to tear down all the progress that we've made in the last 12 years. So the last 12 years, we've rebuilt our law enforcement systems, and various other programs that were lost 12 years ago.
When in a way,
the decisions that he's making is tearing down all the progress that we've made in the last 12 years.
Well,
and
to be fair, it's sort of what he said he was going to do in a way, though. I mean, he was pretty open about wanting to cut down on government spending and stuff. And the law enforcement thing is a little bit more nuanced, and I can understand why someone could have some complaints about that. But in a way, as far as kind of things like, we'll probably get into the OSU extension and stuff. I mean, it's not like he's acting differently than what he said he was going to do. He said he was going to cut funding on things.
Well, and I would disagree in that. So some of the things that you can say you're going to cut government spending, and there's certainly opportunity for that. When I was a county commissioner, we put out a bid to outsource public health. We were trying to look to downsize public health and do that, and not a single group. The state got involved, other agencies came, nobody bid on it. So we rebuilt public health in a different way, in a different focus and format. But you'll notice that the personal gain isn't in the language of the petition. Mm-hmm. The things that are in the petition are things that can be proved. There's people that will testify to it. There's paperwork, there's documentation of it. And so this isn't a personal retaliation. I wasn't looking for a fight, and I knew I'd be attacked, and I knew my character would be challenged. And, that's not fun when you have friends and family that see what things are being said of you that aren't true. I can tell you there's never been a deal between Pat Fahey and I to give me a $300,000 job. I'm not looking for a job in Josephine County. I told Gold Hill.
I'd be disappointed if there was, because I've been asking him for that for a long time. I
you
would love a
wanted
nice
it yourself?
Cushy job. That'd be great.
And I've gotten, I know it's in the
this
sneak
podcast
preview.
so far hasn't paid off. No.
But that's a fabrication.
Okay.
I've never even had a conversation with Pat Fahey about it. So this is a fabrication that was come up with, as well as other things in the sneak preview. But it's interesting because when I was hired at Gold Hill, they asked, how long will you commit here? And I said, let's start with 5 years and let's go from there. And I know it's taking time to build over there, to build from what's going on. And that's not something I'm just going to cut bait and run and go and leave them hanging. I have a desire to be successful in that job. When I went to grad school, when I was a city councilor, it's because someday I wanted to be a city manager. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that path would come back open 10 years later, because I went a different path, being the supervisor at parole and probation and going down the county path. And so this was a dream that I hadn't remembered, and I didn't seek it out. They asked me to apply. And so it was kind of one of those things, but because the job is going well and I have security there, it's why it freed me up to be the chief petitioner, not because I had some axe to grind. No, I have more important things to accomplish in life than to worry about John West. And I will tell you, though, that I live in this community, so when I see that the Firewise program that we got a contract for with the city is abruptly dropped without any warning, when I see that all of a sudden they're stopping the requirement to have fire protection services in their home, and they're going to say that ODF is going to provide structural protection, even though that's a blatant lie. ODF doesn't provide structural protection. That's the state fire marshal's job. And when there's a conflagration, the state fire marshal sends out fire assistance from all these agencies across the state to come down and help. And I've signed 3 conflagrations when I was a county commissioner, and I served on the governor's wildfire task force subcommittee on oh my goodness, not prevention. What's the other one? On wildfire, not on structural response. I'm blanking on the title that I was on. But we looked at how do you fund fighting fire and all the systems and all that other kind of stuff. But to put something in place so much that it went to the state and they said that's illegal and shot it back down to us. And yet we put people in harm's way. To not vote for the sheriff's funding is a significant one. And Jay's got more that I think that we should share on that. But very specific things of
we can
cutting
start
funding.
Going through the different bullet points of the petition to kind of like analyze them a little bit deeper. But yeah.
But to challenge, I'm going to say you can find this. It is there. And people who have watched every meeting see it, but most people don't want to. Mm-hmm. Most people are caught up with their life because life is hard right now and it's expensive right now and they don't have the time. But there is information there. And quite frankly, to say you're just going to cut government spending, that's a cop-out. When you go after the sheriff's funding right after the people of this community voted to put through a district, that's disregarding the will of the voters. That's disregarding what a lot of people fought for. And quite frankly, it's putting us in jeopardy.
Mm-hmm. So, and we'll definitely talk about a little bit more about that here in a moment.
Well, I was going to say the funding of the sheriff's department and everything. I from what I've looked into it, it's one of the topics that I wish I would have researched more. But even that was a little bit nuanced. And of course, there's more than just John West voting on this, and Herman Bartschiger was voting on it as well. But one of the things that I would be really interested to look into this for, and one of the things I'm going to be paying attention to throughout this conversation, is where the personal gain came in, because that was the thing that I was having trouble finding.
It's not in the wording of the petition.
Okay, but like throughout, just kind of throughout the conversation, that's something I'm going to be looking for, because it is a claim that either verbally or throughout the petition that's kind of been made about him, and I would just be interesting to see if there's validity to that. But Jay, go ahead with what you were going to say.
Yeah, big picture. The reason why Lily brought up the claim about her wanting, when we filed this petition, the Commissioner West's response to this was to rebut it by making a series of false statements. One of the biggest series of false statements, the sneak preview that just came out 2 days ago, just landed in mailboxes 2 days ago. There's actually 2 big full page ads that are just nothing but false statement after false statement. They said,
and I haven't actually read that yet. I haven't said
yeah.
that.
Check it out. But basically, it's false statements about Lily, it's false statements about Pat Fahey, and false statements about me. And it's really
Did they say that you're bad at math?
No, they didn't. That's what
I would have started.
That'd be a really big. No, but they said the reason that she's doing this, that she agreed, that she's the chief petitioner, is because she wants Pat Fahey to give her a $300,000 county manager job. She's committed for 5 years to Gold Hill, and Pat Fahey actually challenged him to a polygraph test, and he won't accept that challenge because he knows it's a false statement that he made. So he's making up things when he put out a rebuttal for all of our petition points, and point after point, almost all of them are false statements on his behalf, and it's really sorry to see, and it's really made us realize that we're doing the right thing here with putting this petition out. But yeah, we're gonna go try to quickly go point by point through this. But we've got documentation and to back up everything that's in this petition language. Okay. Because it would be you can't put out a recall petition, and have any false statements in it. That's just a big no-no. But we can back up everything that's in this petition with facts, and it's really curious why Commissioner West is putting out so many false statements, because it's all the public's business. It's a county government, so it's the public business, and most of this can be verified with public records requests, or because almost everything the county does can be proven by public records requests. Show me the document that proves this and this, and so we've got documentation to back up all of this, and it's been really disappointing to see Commissioner West's response to our recall petition, and it's really caused us to realize we're doing the right thing here, and really motivated us to get the word out even more, because anyway. So we'll go point by point through this.
Let's jump into it if it's all right, because we don't want to let this podcast go too long. Attention spans are not what they used to be, but we could start with the Pipe Fork property, and if I could just give a brief overview of that. Essentially, the complaint with this Pipe Fork property is that there was a conservationist group, or just a group of locals in Williams, that wanted to purchase this Pipe Fork property. It's 320 acres, and it's basically just undeveloped property. It was logging property, whatever, and people go and hike. There's waterfall sites or something to look at. And they wanted to purchase this property to make sure that they could retain it as like a recreational place for people to go and visit. And then also maybe there was something about wanting to do research programs there or whatever. And the goal was to purchase it and then in turn sell it to BLM, the Federal Bureau of Land Management there. This deal started years ago. And the original bid was something like $2 million for the price of this property. And then John West apparently had a new appraisal done on it, and they obviously, the board feed of timber there had grown, and so the number had gone up, and it was more like 2.7 is what apparently this internal appraisal was done at. And then they kind of negotiated and reasoned for 2.3 million, and then that was the number that was going to be used going forward. But John West's complaint on this was that they were going to be selling this to BLM, right? It's a federal organization. They have different rules than us. And so the guarantee that it was going to be kept open to the public, that wasn't something that BLM was able to guarantee. And so John West said that if you want to sell this, then you need to put a deed restriction on it where they're not going to just come in and log it, because you said we couldn't log it. So like, why are you going to let BLM come in and do that? So that's just an overview of it. So would you like to sort of share just where you thought that he acted in bad faith throughout that?
Yeah, so the original deal was have a government appraisal done, which they did. It came out at approximately 2.0 million, and then the county would do the deal at appraised value. Well,
who does that appraisal?
It's a specific government organization that does it, and any exchange of federal land is required to do it. Mm-hmm. So the county foresters who originally put the price out at 1.6 million. But BLM is who had done the official government appraisal that came out at 2 million even. Mm-hmm. And they came up to that price. And that's where that one came from. It was internal. It wasn't a government appraisal that brought it up to that higher level. But there was a letter of intent to sell early on done in that group. And then from there, but sorry, Jay, go on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So the official, I think it's called Yellow Book government appraisal, came in at approximately 2.0 million. And then they tried to get the deal done at 2 million. And this was pretty early on when John West got into office in, early 2023. Mm-hmm. And so, I'm pretty sure John West was one, he spearheaded a new internal appraisal. They've never released the details of the appraisal, but somehow they came up with a new internal appraisal, and they felt the property was worth 2.7 million.
When he did tell me, I believe during our interview, who did that appraisal, but it was some sort of county group or whatever that he had asked to come do that appraisal. Do you know if the government appraisal for 2 million was ever released? Because my understanding was that there was a complaint that this appraisal wasn't released, and my understanding was that it's not really standard to release these appraisals because it has a lot of like private information or government information in it.
My understanding is the $2 million, the original appraisal was released because that was an official federal government appraisal. Okay. The new appraisal after John West got into office, that was not released. The county refused to release the details on that, mm-hmm. and they have a right. They have a legal right to do that, but it's a little bit shady that they wouldn't tell anybody how they came up with that 2.7 million. And but the problem is they then renegotiated the deal. So they worked with this nonprofit organization in the group of a bunch of people that were primarily live out in the Williams area of Josephine County, and they said, okay, we did a new internal appraisal. We believe the property's worth 2.7, but meet us in the middle and we'll do a deal. So they did. They raised another 300,000 relatively quickly, from what I recall. Mm-hmm. And so they met him in the middle, and then Commissioner West put it, at the very last moment when they were getting ready to sign the deal, he put a condition on them that he knew BLM would never accept. I mean, Here's a guy who's done, forestry and mining work and done a lot of business with BLM. He knew by putting this brand new condition on them, he knew it would torpedo the deal and cancel the deal. And so it was negotiated in bad faith, because he put this BLM will never sign off on we will never harvest this timber, because what if a fire comes through? They might want to harvest the timber after a fire. If a fire comes through that area, they will never sign a deed restriction says that they will never harvest. But
you can keep it open when a fire might temporarily shut down a property for safety. Well, they've done that through. I mean, you'll see it every summer when there's a fire. All right, this section's shut down. You can't go up these roads and different stuff like that. So,
well, if the intention was to prevent it from being logged, though, why was the group's goal to sell it to BLM if they knew that couldn't be guaranteed?
Well, BLM guaranteed, under normal conditions, they're never going to do any harvesting out there.
What was the guarantee though? Was it just kind of like a word of mouth thing, or?
He wanted a permanent deed restriction of never timber harvest. And that's not something that the BLM will ever sign off on, because there may be...
Nor do you have a right to put a deed restriction like that on somebody you're selling property to.
Yeah, there may be some sort of unforeseen condition that would require them to do some timber harvesting, and they can't have a legal prohibition on that. No, but since it was part of a research area, or part of a proposed expansion to a research area, they're never gonna harvest the timber out there. It was gonna be basically a permanent conservation. So not only did he negotiate in bad faith by putting a condition in there at the 11th hour that they would never sign off on, but it was a bad business decision. Again, back to those dollars and cents. It was a really bad business decision. Even in his interview with you, he admitted that if they can sell a timber property, they can then reinvest those dollars in another timber property, like out on the coast, that you can be a lot more productive. So it was a really bad business decision as well, because they were selling it for a price that was over the official federal government appraisal.
Well, this is kind of where it comes into like where I'm always looking for the intent behind it, because you can say that you disagree with this because it would have been profitable for the county. But one of my thoughts is I was like, well, I would prefer to have county I could understand why it would be reasonable to want property to be in county hands instead of BLM hands, which is of course a federal organization. So like logistically, I was, well, I don't understand why you would want to, maybe have some reservations about that, or at the very least you would want to make sure that you get a good price for it. And knowing that John West is a business person, he understands dollars and cents, and even that he's interested in, perhaps purchasing coastal timber properties. What do you think the intention was behind preventing this sale from going through?
Well, more importantly, going back to, it's a bad faith negotiation. If he didn't want it sold, or he didn't want it this, then why say, okay, you guys, we're going to split it in the middle. You come up with 2.3, we'll sell it to you. Why? That was done specifically by them. And so they came up with the money and never mind, we're going to come up with something else. If you are negotiating with good faith, you put that all out there up front so people know what to expect and to deal with. BLM was a part of it the whole time.
Yeah.
You don't go back at the last minute and say, never mind, I don't want them to have it, or I don't want them to have it, when you've signed and here's the thing with how our government works. It doesn't matter if he was in office when this started, because Pipeport conversation started when I was in office. And when the letter was signed with the intent to sell, somebody else might come into office, but you have to carry on the business for the county, for the best of the people. And so you can say, okay, maybe he wasn't even there when that was signed, but they continued in the negotiations. The government appraisal came out and was released, because that's how they knew to bring it up to $2 million.
Yeah.
And then the next piece is, then they came back and said, well, split the difference. You don't have any skin in the game, local people, so go ahead and come up with the extra money. And when they did, then they said, okay, never mind, we're not going to sell it because we want this, or we'll only sell it in this ramification. You don't get to put a deed restriction on how somebody's going to use the land after you sell it. You can say if you're going to sell it, it'll revert back to the county. You can put a reverter clause back in there. But I'm not going to sell a house to you and say, but you can only plant a cherry tree in the backyard and you can never cut down my fig tree. It's your property once you buy it.
One thing though is that it's just I can understand how later in the negotiations different things come to light, and that maybe because the original reason that this conservationist group put behind the property was that they didn't want it to be logged. And so for me it was just strange that they wanted to give it to BLM in the first place, because it seems as if giving it to a federal organization would give you less control over what to do with it. But again, it just kind of brings me back to, and I would really love to
except it went through Congress and they agreed to what was going on there. So this wasn't something that just happened and wasn't just willy-nilly. To get that property exchange, to get it all the way through Congress and have them agree to the sale is significant. And to be that far in that process and that much time, and then add a stipulation that wasn't ever going to be agreed
but he came into this new, this was happening before him.
But that got added way into it.
So your question is, why did he torpedo the deal?
Well, the intent. I feel like that's important.
And so So I'm going to try to answer that. So
Yeah.
I had my suspicions, watching all the county meetings and watching meeting after meeting where a bunch of people from Williams would show up and testify we want to get this done, and watching him put an unrealistic condition on the deal at the 11th hour, a condition that he knew would cancel the deal. So why did he do that? Well, the reason is he didn't want an environmentalist group to get a win. Basically.
So you think politically motivated?
So it was absolutely politically motivated, and that was my suspicion when he did it. But his rebuttal to this recall petition confirmed it. So
Correct.
when he put out a rebuttal to all the points in this recall petition, just a couple of days without even checking with us as to why we wrote the language up the way he did. He put out a rebuttal to this recall petition, in a day or two after we were approved to gather signatures for this recall petition. And in his rebuttal, he said an environmentalist group wanted to do X, Y, and Z, and that's why we said no. But he basically confirmed that he was basically, his political allies said, we don't want you to give an environmentalist group a win, and that's why he torpedoed the deal at the last minute. And so, and that is actually a pattern throughout many of these petition points. It's I'm putting my political allies ahead of the best interests of Josephine County citizens in my decision making, and that is actually at the core of why we wrote this petition the way and the concerns that we have. They're time after time they're putting their political allies ahead of what's best for Josephine County. What would have been best for Josephine County in this case, in our opinion and in my opinion, would have been to sell it and then reinvest those dollars into more productive timberland on the coast that would have. Every extra dollar that the county earns in its timber inventory is an extra dollar that can go to help law enforcement and the veteran services and juvenile justice are the two primary programs that see the benefit from the net revenues of the forestry.
So I remember one of the complaints regarding the Pipe Fork property was that there was some uncertainty about whether or not John West owned a property adjacent, which I researched that fairly well, and it seems as if there just really isn't like a lot of validity to that particular claim, because even like on the Mike Jones show, he showed that he has like the sales agreement between him and what's the guy's name? Mylicki, what's his name?
If he hasn't recorded it with the
Yeah.
state, if he has that, he hasn't
Well,
recorded
the
it.
only thing with the Secretary of State is that his the Cascade Land Holdings Company that supposedly owned that adjacent property, it says that it was dissolved in like 2016 or something. But then also, I think it was Bill Mylicki was the guy he sold it to. But anyways, that guy's been paying taxes on it for X number of years since he sold it, I think in 2020 or something. So I think it's pretty clear that he doesn't own the property there. So would you say that more so your complaint with this is more so like the political agenda that he had with not selling the property?
Yeah, it's negotiating in bad faith was the claim. Was the claim that we made in petition. We did not list in the petition language anything about how he may or may not own a neighboring property. If you look in the state records, he was the president of the company that currently owns that property. He was the last in the last annual filing that they did years ago. He was the president. He was the owner of that company that still to this day owns that land. But that was not one of our chief concerns. That's been talked about a lot.
Because one of the things that was on the website and the kind of more in-depth thing it was talked about. But yes, in the actual petition, it wasn't mentioned yet.
Yeah. We have a 13-page fact sheet on recalljohnwest.com. That backs up all of these petition points. We did mention that as a concern, but we didn't even necessarily, we knew that was a concern of we knew that somebody had filed an ethics claim. It wasn't, I don't think it was anybody in our group. I don't even know who filed the ethics claim. We knew that was a concern out there in the public, but that was not our chief, that was not our main concern, and the reason that we made that one of the core points in this recall.
So the company he was president of is still listed as the owner. So if he showed a paper on Mike Jones saying that I sold it to this group, that's not recorded. So there's, as far as
Well, what's been recorded was that the person he sold it to has been paying the property tax on it for the past few years, and then the company itself, on the Secretary of State, it shows it's been dissolved or something.
And that may be true,
Yeah.
but again,
well,
that's
just
not,
why I didn't think that was a very convincing point, because it at the very best it was there was some hearsay involved, and it just didn't seem
It's
like
not
a very
hearsay
well,
that he's the
yeah,
person listed as the owner and the secretary's or the president of the company. And
Right.
the previous sale that was documented was one of his companies to another one of his companies. Okay. So when you can, if a company is registered and the property ownership is recorded with the county, that hasn't been changed. So, somebody's making a statement that appears to be on paper what's there.
Once the company was dissolved, and he has that sales agreement with, I think the guy's name is Bill Mielicki or something like that. But once the company was dissolved and it was passed over to Bill, and he's been paying these property taxes.
Then record
on
it with the county
well,
records.
it was up to the new owner to update the records with the Secretary of State, and so that's why it hadn't been done. It wasn't really up to John West. So, anyways, that was my understanding of it, and it's like I said, there's a little bit of nuance there, but for the sake of time,
Sure.
I think you guys gave me a pretty good understanding of kind of the viewpoints on why that was such a concern for you.
The fact that he may or may not have owned the neighboring property was not our main concern.
Okay, and that's understandable. So the next thing is the issue with OSU, and just give a brief overview for the viewers. OSU Extension, they fund the 4-H program, they fund the Master Gardeners program. I believe they do like a shooting program and different stuff like that. And it's been going on for a very long time. I believe OSU, they receive federal funding, but in order to receive this certain number of federal funding, they have to get approved with the county a number of funding so that they can receive this federal funding. And what John West explained with this was that they had asked for some accountability on some of the funding, on where the money was going, and that they weren't able to provide a very clear idea of that. And what he said was that they were able to give an understanding of where the money was going that the county was providing, but not for the additional grant money that they were receiving because of the money that the county was providing. And so he wanted more accountability there. They weren't able to provide it. He did some more research. He found out that they were paying for like employees in Salem that weren't really necessarily benefiting Josephine County, as well as like lots of travel expenses that weren't really benefiting Josephine County. And so 4-H also experienced kind of an exodus of all these kids that left 4-H because there was sort of this faith issue where they were told that like they weren't allowed to like have crosses on their shirts or something like that. So the 4-H program shrunk significantly, which means that less funding is required. And so for me, logistically, there was sort of a there was a cause for there to have to look at that again, and to say, should we be giving all this funding to OSU? And so I would just love to hear kind of your guys' views on that and why you felt that also was kind of done in bad faith.
Yeah. So when we were in front of, we did, one of these with Mike Jones as well. And,
Mm-hmm.
and the way I phrased it there, I think is appropriate. So, the person who was running the 4-H program, they made a pretty big mistake, and it caused a lot of kids to leave. And I totally support their right to leave and their right to set up a nonprofit organization. And I'm friends with one of the founders of that nonprofit organization.
The new youth and ag program did great, did really good.
Super impressed with what they've done there, and they made a mistake. But what the commissioners did, what Commissioner Bart Sugar and Commissioner West did, is they basically, that one mistake, instead of, holding them accountable and working through that, they burned the whole house down. And there was a lot of collateral damage to the way they made this decision, both last year and this year. Mm-hmm. So they burned, one family member makes a mistake and they burned their whole house down and kicked all the other family members out of the house too. And they didn't listen to the public when they did that. I've never seen anything quite like it. They had, tons of people show up for the budget meetings and the county commissioner meetings where they were deciding all of this, saying, the Master Gardeners is probably the biggest example. So all kinds of collateral programs that were not directly involved in the ag program that 4-H was running. All these collateral programs got cut and eliminated, and the commissioners didn't listen to the public. And this is a voter approved district, years ago. There's much more involved than just the ag program, which I'm happy with what they've done in setting up the new nonprofit, and in time, if they take a moment and listen to the public, maybe we can use that district tax levy and benefit everybody, 4-H and all the other programs that got cut. But they basically, all the collateral damage that was involved in that decision, they did not listen to the public. This was a voter approved district, and they burned the whole house down when holding one family member that made a mistake, and it was a mistake in my opinion.
Yeah.
They just the way they went about making that decision, they did not respect the public's view on that, and they there was all the collateral damage that they didn't seem to care about.
So my understanding though is that you make this analogy about obviously the 4-H program made this mistake, and that doesn't mean we have to burn the whole house down. But it wasn't just the 4-H program that was what kind of led John West and other commissioners to kind of make this decision. It was that they felt that there wasn't accountability with OSU Extension on the way that they were spending these funds.
Yet they're the board.
Yeah.
So the way this special district is set up, the service district rather, is the 3 county commissioners are on the budget committee with 3 citizens that can say, well, I want that money there, or I want that money there, or I want that money there. And so if you have concern with how something's being spent, there's a way that you go about it. Jay talked about that as the finance director, they advise on policy, but they're also the ones that are making sure it's being spent where it needs to go. Instead, they said, we're not going to collect the tax, we're going to zero it out, and we're just going to basically defund these programs. And there was a lot more involved than just master gardeners, and there was programs for veterans, there was all these small gardeners, there was bee programs and pollinators and all this other kind of stuff. There were several 4-H programs that were still thriving because they weren't replaced when the other group happened, and they felt disenfranchised. But there is more there, but they're in a position of authority and responsibility as the budget committee members to do something about it. Where were those attempts to fix that other than just simply coming and making a motion to say, we're not going to support this, and then cutting the tax for it?
And so the financial information that, as I understand, the financial information that they asked for from OSU was not how our local dollars are spent. It was how the overall program dollars were spent. So as I understand it, so they've got several people that work with the OSU Extension Service District. They might work in Josephine County one day, and Jackson County the next day, or there's different regions and so forth.
We're part of a 7-county district.
They asked for the levy, that the 4.5 cent levy, property tax levy, brought into Josephine County about $426,000 per year when you factor in the discounts that that come through paying your taxes on time. Okay. So they have about $426,000. That $426,000 leverages over $1 million of actual services that we're receiving because of federal grants and the time that the OSU program spends above and beyond. They basically put a bunch more money and resources into Josephine County, well beyond that $400,000 that's collected here locally. They were asking for information about not how our local dollars are being spent, but they wanted a whole bunch of detail about how the overall OSU programs, and they can't. It's probably hard
outside
for them. It's probably hard for them to say, okay, we spent X amount of dollars in Josephine County and X amount of dollars in Jackson County, because they're working in a bunch of different counties, and they're providing
the
services.
Idea behind that, though, is that when we give this funding to them, they're only receiving that grant money because we gave them the funding. So in a way, the two are tied together. So I almost understand the reason for wanting that. But one of my questions is when we talk about intent, right? Because that's kind of, I said that's something I'm going to be looking for here. Is John West said that he wanted to come in and cut budgets, right? He said he wanted to come in and cut funding. So it's not as if he's being inconsistent with his ideology on how government should be run. But to his credit, he had done that forum where he wanted to invite 4-H, he wanted to invite master gardeners and find out how the county could fund them directly, because at the time OSU was like, they were like charging master gardeners for this like greenhouse space and this like this building that they were using, and he wanted to talk to them about, hey, how can we just like let you use that and things. So what I would like to know is he offered this forum to say like, hey, we don't like how OSU is spending their money, but we're willing to try and fund you directly. We could put something on the ballot in May to where you could get that funding, and we would just kind of rewrite the language on how that funding comes to you. But so what do you feel was the intent behind this? Why would he just try and shut down the whole OSU extension? What was the motive?
He ran into another group that politically he disagreed with. So it was another, we disagree with how you're doing things politically, and we're gonna burn the house down as a result. So, if we hadn't have filed this recall petition, they probably wouldn't even. They had a meeting a week or two ago to try to figure out how to restore these services. Well, why didn't you just take the time and listen to the people that were telling you not to cut these services in the first place? So they can't get master gardeners back even if they wanted to, because that's a program that has to go through a land grant university like OSU. And so they can't restore the Master Gardeners program, at least not in name.
Of course, I was going to say they could do the same thing that 4-H did, where they kind of switched to the youth and ag and that sort of thing.
Yeah, but it is a resource that you have when you, for instance, in another job that I've had, we had concern about a certain weed that was growing, and we can call OSU at the extension office, and they will research and tell you the best way to deal with that. You get all this research and other stuff that comes from being part of the university.
It's more than just the one program and stuff. Yeah, no, I understand.
And so there's probably several things that we could fund it locally, but we're out significant amount of grant dollars as a result. So we're going to be losing out on all those federal grant dollars that used to support all those things that the extension service used to do. And if we want to
revenues and resources to the community,
if we want to fund it locally, it's going to cost local people more than if we had stayed with OSU. So it would have been much more financially productive to just work out our differences and move on. And so rather than burning the house down, as I say.
Well, and part of my viewpoint too is I saw how successful Youth and Ag was, and as after leaving the 4-H program, Youth and Ag is a completely private, just nonprofit organization, and part of my viewpoint is that I'm a fan of limited government. I'm a fan of not overspending, and I believe that the private sector does almost everything better than government does. So just like ideologically, I understood like that kind of viewpoint behind it, but also there were a lot of people that were upset about losing this, and obviously it's not just the $441,000 that the county was paying to OSU Extension, but there is the grant money that comes in. So honestly, I can see a little bit of both sides to that. But if it's okay if we move on to some of the other ones, just for the sake of time here. When we're talking about sort of basically the violations of state laws and campaign finance and that sort of things, would you like to give an overview to that for the viewers on kind of where that bullet point on the petition came from?
Yeah, that's one of we knew at the time of filing the petition, we knew that that Commissioner West was facing several. And Commissioner Bartschiger were facing several ethics violations and bully
employment law,
bully claims, bully employment law claims. We knew there were several outstanding. In fact, it wasn't until a recent interview from West that we knew there was like somewhere between, I think I've heard numbers between 13 and 19 of them.
I think it's actually 14 to 16, but
we
to
only
be fair though, most of them have been dismissed. So it's like, and also like, just for the viewers to know, it's like, it's actually not really hard to file an ethics complaint about someone. Like any individual can do it. You just file it with the state, and sometimes they don't go any farther than just, the guy looking at it being like, nah, this is, BS, and they just get rid of it. So like, to me, like having the ethics violations filed against you isn't necessarily, doesn't necessarily mean you did something wrong, but
behind it
sure.
And Commissioner West's response to this when we called out. So one of the more certain things here that we were concerned about is when it comes to violating campaign finance laws. So we made this claim. We put all the detail in a fact sheet on our website. We know Commissioner West has read that, and then his response, both in his interview with you and the interviews he's done with other media sources, he said that, I don't have to file those. I can spend all the money I want personally campaigning for or against things, and because I'm doing it personally, I don't have to file it with the state.
Isn't that true, though? I mean, under constitutional rights,
that's not true. And,
but I could do it right now. I could go put it out in the sneak preview and say whatever I wanted it, as long as the sneak preview approved it. As a private citizen, you're allowed to spend your funds how you want.
If it's related to a campaign, you have to file that with the Oregon Secretary of State in the campaign finance
How
database.
come he hasn't gotten in trouble with Orstar, though? Because I heard that Orstar basically threw that out, that there wasn't anything there because it was his constitutional right.
Nobody's
filed a complaint
Nobody's
as far as that we're aware.
A complaint. But
well, how come nothing has come from it then? Because constitutionally, that was my understanding is that you were allowed to.
I'm considering filing a complaint because of the false statements that Commissioner West keeps making in response to this point. So what I brought here is, so you can do this right now on your phone if you wanted to. You just Google Oregon Campaign Finance Manual and go to page 12 of that manual, and this is what you'll see. You'll see it says independent expenditure filer. So you can't just anybody that spends money for or against a political candidate or a political measure, something that's on the ballot, you have to file that with the state if you spend more than $250. So here's the actual language from the campaign finance manual. It says a person makes independent expenditures of more than $250 in a calendar year for
what's that number?
$250.
Okay.
So if you personally put an ad in the sneak preview and you spent more than $250 and you were campaigning for or against a ballot,
I would never do that. That could buy me like 2 months worth of Top Ramen. But go ahead.
Understood.
What flavor though?
It says
always the chicken guy. Yeah.
And this is under the title of Independent Expenditure Filers on page 12 of this manual. A person that makes independent expenditures of more than $250 in a calendar year for a communication to support or oppose any candidate or measure. And that's when you're required to file with the state.
Can you remind me again where this comes from?
It's Campaign Finance Manual. So just Google Oregon Campaign Finance Manual. You'll see the document on the Secretary of State's website. And it's page 12, and I'll leave this here with you. So you can
absolutely,
see it.
Please, and maybe we'll throw something up on the screen after,
And so he says in rebuttal to our recall petition, he says, "Oh, that was just personal money. I wasn't involved with a political action committee, therefore I didn't have to make I didn't have to file that with the state." Well, that's just completely false. It's ridiculous. If you didn't have to file any time you personally spent money opposing or supporting a measure or a candidate, if anybody personally could do that without having file, well, all the Oregon campaign expenditures would be done personally, so that they could hide who they're supporting or who they're opposing. The reason that law is there is so that there can be transparency about campaign spending, and so it's absolutely ridiculous for him to say that I wasn't required to do that. And so he spent thousands and thousands of dollars, and not just this year, but in previous years. He's been he puts his money where his mouth is, and I'll give him credit for that, because he spent a lot of money opposing or campaigning for something. He spends a lot of money campaigning for the people that he supports and for himself. He spends a lot of money opposing people that he doesn't like, or ballot measures that he doesn't like, but he's never filed it with the state. So he is completely in violation of state laws. And for him to come out and instead of saying, okay, I realize I did something wrong here, I'm going to fix it going forward, he makes a false statement and says, I didn't have to do that, which is just completely false. And it's really disappointing for an elected commissioner to take that viewpoint. And so he spent a bunch of money opposing the fire district measure a couple of years ago. Spent a bunch of money opposing the charter changes the charter change measure that was up on the May ballot this year. And, I understand, and I don't disagree with his viewpoint on many of these things, but to say that he wasn't required legally to file these things is just completely false and completely misleading.
Well, it's a tricky thing, because for me, it's the idea of freedom of speech, is it's a very real thing. And, but the difference is that, we're not asking to restrict someone's ability to share a viewpoint. We're just asking that it's being reported. So I can understand that as well.
Yeah, it's just you have freedom of speech. You just have, when it comes to campaign spending, though, you have to report it. And so that's the bottom line.
We're getting low on battery.
We got both these cameras about to die.
Yeah, that's good because I gotta go to the bathroom too. Would you guys be good to like go again for just a little bit longer and go through some of the others? I don't want to keep you too long.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do a quick break and then we'll get back in there. Okay, so I want to move through the rest of this stuff a little bit quicker so I can get you guys out of here, and so you guys can have some dinner tonight and hopefully chill out at home for a little bit. So let's move on to the library district, and if you could just give a brief overview of that bullet point on the petition and why that complaint was brought up.
Yeah, sure. So it was towards the end of 2023. The Commissioner West and some of his political allies started what I would say attacking the library district, and very intentionally so. And I think that this is probably one of those key things that you're going to be interested in, because I think in one of the early interviews or one of the early podcasts that you guys did on this recall petition topic, you were like, why would anybody attack a library? So I can't answer that either, but it is pretty clear to me that there was a direct financial attack, a direct attack on the library to try to weaken the library, because again, they see it as a political party or a political group that they disagree with in political ways, and so that's
to be
why
fair, it's
that's
not
why they
completely
attacked the library.
unfounded. I mean, if you go in there's all sorts of there's very politically motivated books being promoted in the library in some ways. So in a way I kind of understand that, but yes, you say that they sort of.
Some of the allegations were things that had happened at libraries and other places. They weren't going on here. So there was allegations made, and there were attempts to get people on the board. So they ran for office, and they didn't get elected. But there have been changes that have happened in the library because Tina's pretty conservative. You got a conservative voice on there. They've got to change some process, and there's challenge processes, or there's things that can happen. And I got some homeschoolers involved with the library to say, what books do you guys need there, and what are some of your concerns? And they talked about books that are cycled out and the purchasing process and all that kind of stuff. And so you get down to the policies and the nuance, but that's not really what the allegation is. There's a whole bunch that was going behind the scenes, and when it came down to it, was the attack on the district. And I'll put it back to Jim.
Yeah, so they political allies of Commissioner West, they ran for board seats at the library at November last year. They were unsuccessful, and then one of those individuals that ran for a board seat, then they tried to they then tried to attack the library a different way.
What individual was this?
And the individual was his legal name is Edgar Mike Pelfrey. He goes by Mike Pelfrey in most of the meetings. He attends many of the county commissioner meetings, many of the city council meetings too.
So he ran to be on
he ran to be on the library board as an elected member of the library board, because the library district is an independent district, has nothing, very little to do with Josephine County, but it's an independent district with an independent board of directors.
So he failed to get on the board, and then he wanted to withdraw from the library after that?
Yeah, okay. So then this was very closely coordinated with Commissioner West. There was a number of people, Mike Pelfrey being the first, that tried to legally withdraw from the district. Now, there are some state laws that say, under certain circumstances, you can withdraw from a special district. Probably the most common example of this that makes sense to people is, so if you're in an irrigation district and you're paying fees to the irrigation district, if your property can't be served by that irrigation district, something changed, or you can't get water from that irrigation district, okay, there's a process where you can withdraw from that irrigation district because your property can't be served.
Well, and that's the part that I can understand and relate with, is that as someone who doesn't really go to the library, if I was paying into this because I was in that district, I would understand why someone might be like, well, I'm not really feeling like I'm benefiting from this, I would like to withdraw. But your guys'
but state law doesn't allow that.
Well, and that's
so state law language is very specific, that you have to show that the property cannot be served by the district. So it has nothing to do with the individual living on the property. In order for you to withdraw or go through that process to petition, state law says you have to show the property cannot be served. So the irrigation district is saying example is saying that water's not coming to that property. The property
So I
is
don't wanna
not
be
being
paying for
served.
this, yeah.
Correct. And so
It seems like a difficult thing to quantify with a library because it's not something that serves a property. It's something that serves an individual, really. I mean, if you're not going in and checking out books, well, then the library's not serving
But
you.
state law is clear that you have to show that the property can't be served by the district.
How would you show that
Well,
in a
I
library
can show you
scenario?
the antithesis of that. If somebody who's residing on the property runs for an elected position of the board of that district, the property's serving their need if they had got elected. But not getting elected, now you're saying the property didn't serve to be a part of that. One of the ways that you can see is the district is unique. It's not a district that goes the whole county. They basically looked where each of the branches were within the county, and they took the precincts in a circle around them, and that's where the district is. People can annex in. You can't annex out until the district has been existing for 2 years. But you also have to show how your property cannot be served by that district. And so it has to go beyond the political lines. It has to go beyond the ideology of people running it or board members. People come and go, but the property, is it being served by that district?
So if I could I kind of explain my understanding of what this process of the withdrawal looked like and why it ended up with this lawsuit with the library and that sort of thing, and then maybe you guys can fill in anywhere that I might be having it wrong or help me to have some more understanding. Because my basic understanding of this, and this is actually off the camera, what John West kind of explained to me was how this stuff came about, was basically Mike Pelfrey came to them and he said he wanted to withdraw from the library district, and they looked at the state law and they said, okay, there is a process to withdraw from the library district. They didn't have an opt-out form available, and so they went to, I believe they went to Wally Hicks with legal, and they adjusted the opt-in form to make it to where they could opt out. And then after Pelfrey filled out this petition form that had been adjusted to be an opt-out form, they sent it to legal. They also sent it to the county assessor, and then they sent it to the library, and the library actually signed off on it. They signed off on that this guy could withdraw. And then when they brought it back, they found out there were issues within that this wasn't done in the right way. And so then the commissioners froze the petition and said, we're not going to go any farther on this. And then the library had filed this lawsuit against them, but it never even made it to court because they had seen that this had been frozen, that had sort of been stopped before it went through. So can you guys correct me on anywhere where I was wrong on that? Because one of the things when John explained this to me was that one of my thoughts was, if this process of withdrawal was not legal or it was done incorrectly, why was it that when it went through legal with Wally Hicks, it went through the assessor, and the library itself signed off on it, but for some reason John West is the guy that gets blamed for doing it wrong? It seems like it should have been caught throughout all those areas.
Well, I don't think the library ever signed off on it.
That's new. I've never heard that before.
Because
Okay.
the library had to file a lawsuit just to stop it. So I don't think
They
the
didn't
library
freeze it until after
I don't
the
think the
lawsuit was
library
filed.
would have signed off on anything, and quite frankly, county legal was not heavily. It was pretty apparent to me because I watched all those meetings, like I watch every county commissioner meeting. It was pretty apparent to me that they didn't spend a lot of time with county legal because they asked one of the attorneys that works in the county legal's office in the very it was either that week or the week after. It was the week after. So this was so what Mr. West told you was only part of the story, not all the story. So Mr. West coordinated many other people to withdraw from the district as well, because again, he's trying to attack the district and he's trying to weaken the district. Now he coordinated.
If they don't have enough people paying into the district, it's going to financially damage them.
This was like the one test case, but in the very week after, within a day or two after Mike Pelfrey, the two out of the three commissioners approved the withdrawal from the district. The county approved paperwork for 5 or 6 other people to do exactly the same thing. They had people lined up, and I believe it was a whole lot more than just 5 or 6. But they had a bunch of people lined up that they were going to have withdraw from the district because they the political ideology, they were just against the library district, even though our local district hadn't necessarily done any of the things that.
And I'm, I'm not unbiased either, because I got beef with the library because they kicked me out of their district when they left and then came back. I wasn't included anymore, so I was like, I'm not gonna pay $60 for my thing.
This is a vote. This is
I'll
a
just
voter.
buy the books, make my own library.
This is a voter-approved district, though, and it gets back to the core of many of these recall petition points come back to not respecting the voice of the people.
Yeah.
So this is a district that was approved by the majority of the people within the district, and they're not respecting the process of, when you vote or approve something and then you try to go around the voters and weaken the district or defund the district. When it's a voter approved district, that's kind of a big deal. That's saying the commissioner doesn't respect the vote of the people, and that's kind of like a key concern throughout these recall petition points.
Sure.
But
you want to make sure
there were
several
people that in the very next weekly business session. So the county has a business session each and every week. The very next business session, there were 5 or 6 other people that were going to withdraw from the district too. Clearly, a coordinated campaign to attack the library district. And government never approves paperwork that quickly, like within a day or two of the first withdrawal being illegally approved. They had a bunch of people lined up, and government never does paperwork that quickly. So it was clearly a coordinated attack. Not only that, but people that were trying to join the library district because they were outside the district and didn't want to have to pay the $60 or whatever the district fee is, to be a member of the library. People that were trying to annex into the district and join the district, Commissioner West called them and made some very misleading statements to them, like warning them that, hey, if you join the district, you could be financially liable for X, Y, and Z. And while technically what he said was true, he was basically trying to talk people out of joining the library district. And this is an independent district that is not governed by the county. So why would a commissioner call and warn people that, hey, you could be financially liable for X, Y, and Z if you join the district? Why would he do that? Well, that's because he was trying to financially attack the district, and that's just completely inappropriate for an
And
independent
I can tell you that my memory is that the assessor's office was not consulted either.
Okay.
And that was one of the complaints that had been stated, is that they had they actually consulted the assessor's office, advice could have been given on the process. And
well, that was one of my questions, is why it had supposedly passed through all these hands and never gotten caught. But I guess it's
I'd
just
never
something
heard that
it
had passed through all those hands.
Yeah,
that's news today.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's actually the opposite of what has been stated.
Yeah, it was a very, very rushed process, and I don't even think county legal weighed into that process very heavily, because I think if they had, they would not have done what they did. Yeah. So it was a very rushed process by the county commissioners.
It's interesting. It's obviously more nuanced, as with all of these things. And in a way, I can still kind of see both sides, because, you could say that it was kind of a coordinated attack to financially damage the library by having all these districts withdraw. But also at the same time, it could have just been that there were a group of individuals that were tired of paying taxes for something that they didn't feel like they were getting.
It just seems to be the same group that keeps coming up over and over again.
Okay, yeah.
And it was clearly coordinated by Commissioner West. He was making phone calls to people that were trying to get into the district. He was, all the people that he's close to politically. It's we're a small town, a small county, by population. You know who's working with each other in the political arena, and it was all those same people that were trying to withdraw from the district. It was clearly a coordinated attack against the district.
You asked earlier about, John West is just one vote. Herman Bearchicker is also voted on some of these things. But there were also promises made along the way, and there are some things that have just been Commissioner West, and one of those was voting against the sheriff's budget. He was the only budget committee member to do that. But Jay brought a description that the sheriff gave as far as the general fund support that the county has given towards the sheriff's office and what changed this year after the levy. And it undermines the will of the voters that passed a levy, that $5 million more was into the budget, and yet there's no personnel increases. There was actually essentially a cut in services, but you're paying more. And it's one of those things that you're like, okay, that is also not following the will of the voters. And it's not being responsible with what has been given. You can say you're going to cut The problem is that there's a lot of funding that comes to the county that's via federal dollars, via the state, and there's very specific things you have to do with that funding, and you can't just route it somewhere else. But in several of the circumstances that we've pointed out, the library district, the 4-H OSU district, the sheriff's district, of all things that our citizens of Josephine County have voted in. And the commissioners are supposed to be stewards, good stewards of what the citizens have voted in, not putting your own political ambition above what the will of the voters are.
Yeah, so we saw, the OSU Extension Service District, a voter-approved district, defunded. We saw financial attacks on the library district. It's an independent voter-approved district that the county does not even manage. So they attack on the district. And then the big thing that got me involved is, so in November of last year, November of 2023, voters approved a new law enforcement services district. So it was the final step that needed to happen to really get the sheriff back to, relatively full strength. It's still not, everything that the sheriff should be at. But, as we've talked about as we started this podcast, 12 years ago, we lost a bunch of money that used to support the sheriff's office, and we had to completely rebuild over the last 12 years. Well, we finally got a law enforcement services district approved that was going to increase staff in the sheriff's office, and finally get back to the sheriff actually providing services, close to 24/7. It might not have been full strength, but pretty close to 24/7 services like most police agencies provide. And so I'm not going to ask you if you own a home in Josephine County outside the city of Grants Pass, but basically all the voters outside the city of Grants Pass, because the city has its own police department that's paid for separately, but all the voters outside the city of Grants Pass voted and approved in November of 2023 a new law enforcement services district and a new 99-cent tax levy as a result. So now everybody starting this fiscal year, so this property tax bill that's about to land in mailboxes, next month, everybody now has a new 99-cent property tax levy to help support the sheriff's office. So when the county brought their budget proposal forward this year, that district was supposed to pay for close to 20 new staff members, and that new district brings in over $5 million per year of tax revenue to support the sheriff's office. So that's a pretty significant for the voters of Josephine County to say, yes, I want to tax myself more because I want our sheriff services to be, I want the sheriff to respond when I call 911, and I want.
That's one of the few legitimate purviews of government to have good law enforcement.
So we have a brand new voter approved law enforcement services district out for all the area outside the city of Grants Pass. When they brought their budget proposal forward this year, there were 0 new staff members in the sheriff's office. 0. It's like, how do
Didn't they eventually end up approving 5 more?
They approved the equivalent of 5 more, yes.
Okay.
But they're going to need to do a lot more in the next year. But and Commissioner West was the only one to vote against what the sheriff had recommended. So if you look at if you read the Daily Courier headlines leading up to this budget meeting, the sheriff was preparing for a dogfight, and that's in quotes. He said this budget season is going to be a dogfight with the commissioners because so we have this brand new voter approved district, and was supposed to provide funding for close to 20 new sheriff staff members, and there was not one new sheriff staff deputy or sheriff staff member in the original recommended budget, and that's because of how the commissioners wanted this year's budget arranged. So, and this is where I brought this. I don't know if this is going to show up on the camera, but I'm going to give you a digital.
Yeah, we could probably throw it up as an overlay.
I'm going to give you a digital copy of this. I'm going to flash it. I don't know if if the camera's going to pick it up while we're speaking here, but basically what they did is they took money away from other areas that used to be part of the sheriff budget. So the general fund used to give, a certain amount of money to the sheriff's office each year. So because he got a new funding source approved, they ended up taking other money away from the sheriff, which is a big no-no. When you go out to the public and the public says, yes, I'm going to vote to tax myself more because I want more sheriff services, and then you take money away from the sheriff and other, to do other things with it. That's just completely going against the will of the voters, and that's what really got me motivated to hold Commissioner West accountable for these, and every one of these, sometimes it's Commissioner West voting or making inappropriate actions by himself. Sometimes he's 2 of 3 commissioners that voted to do something. But in every one of these cases, if he had voted differently, the outcome would be different. And that that poor decision, or that decision that hurt law enforcement or hurt county revenues, or millions of dollars of revenue losses as a result of these bad decisions. In every one of these cases, if Commissioner West had voted differently, it would not have gone the way it did.
Eli, and there's another area I'd like to point out to your attention, and that would be the budget for the IT department that increased by $800,000 this budget session. The argument that has been given that they had to increase it is because all these other departments have software that's expiring and they have to buy new software and equipment. Well, if they had replaced every computer in the county, it would not have cost that increase. If they had every department has software that they maintain and have to do. When they have to update that software, the department is charged for that software. It's not the IT budget that pays for it. It's the department that has to pay for that. And so there's portions that gets individually, like IT handles the Microsoft contracts, and then that goes out and you pay for how many licenses your department is. But IT does not keep the weight of that cost in their department. Each department pays for their usage. So to say that we're going to increase...
What did you think the money was going to be used for then?
They're starting all this other technology to basically monitor all the other departments, have access and do all this other kind of stuff. But you cut the general fund support from the law enforcement, and then you give IT $800,000 when it's not necessary. It's not transparent on what's being spent on that software. That software is charged to those departments. So why did they need $800,000 more?
Well, the argument, I believe, was that there's been kind of like an increased risk of cybersecurity, and that's what it was supposed to go to. And apparently there was something, some kind of statement issued by the state to local governments about how there was like this real risk of cybersecurity, and they were like warning people to like up it and stuff.
And it's not that cost. I can tell you that, having just went through it with CIS insurance.
Okay.
But that issue aside, they took money that used to support law enforcement. They took it out of law enforcement and used it for other purposes. And that it didn't necessarily go all to IT, but it's a component. But this is a slide. So when the sheriff himself was making a presentation to the commissioner, or to the budget committee on June 4th of this year, this was a slide from his presentation. So this is not my work. This is the sheriff's slide from his budget presentation. And so you'll see up in the corner, there's the sheriff is actually presenting this. So this is just a snapshot that came from the budget meeting. And you'll see that, they took a couple $1 million away of money that traditionally has supported the sheriff's office. They took that away from the sheriff this year because of this new voter approved law enforcement services district. So if you had a house outside the city of Grants Pass, somewhere in Josephine County, you're now paying an extra 99-cent property tax levy, but you're not getting anything else for it. And it's completely against what the voters just voted for back in November of last year.
And when asked if they would take away from the sheriff if the levy passed, they said no. And then they turned around and did it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, guys. For the sake of time, we do got to start to wrap it up, and I don't think we're able to touch on every single topic. I do appreciate you guys going into the details and the minutia of it. I hope that everyone's been able to kind of follow along with it. Just to kind of wrap things up here, are there any kind of little final points you guys want to make? I suppose anything else that you think is important to touch on?
Well, I would. Oh, go ahead. I'll go be quick and then I'll pass it off. For me, it's not necessarily I might agree with some of the arguments that are made of, I don't agree with what that group's doing. I don't want to support that. I don't want to do this. But ultimately, a commissioner has to do the best for the whole of the county. And you represent people from all backgrounds and all walks of life. And we have to make the decisions that are in the best interest of everybody. And when you make decisions that put the health and the safety of our community at risk, that you are increasing our costs, you are losing revenues to our community, and you're cutting valuable services, and you're not following the law in doing it, that is why this recall's here. And so there's more that Jay can say, but essentially those are things that we can't compromise on. You have to follow the law. We have to keep our community safe. And you have to look at, how do we increase revenue without it being taxes? How do we not lose revenues when it's going to hurt us, and go through that process?
Yeah, and we can't get necessarily into the minutia. We could probably spend a half an hour on each one of these points that are in our recall petition, but you can go to recalljohnwest.com and you can see the full 13-page detail. You can see all the detail behind each and every one of these is a fact-based based point as far as why we're disappointed in Commissioner West's performance, and so we've got we've got all the detail that anybody can go to the website and they can see all the detail. But basically, in his first 19 months in office, he's lost the county over $6 million of revenue just in that time, based on the decisions that he's made. He's cut back on important health and safety programs and very popular programs. He's attacked the library district. There's 20,000, according to Tina, who's on the library board and is part of our effort. There's 20,000 pieces of library material that goes out each and every month, is what she said, and that's an important service, and it's an independent district from Josephine County, and they're attacking that. Basically, you can't do business in Josephine County unless you're a political ally of Commissioner West, and that is clear. And I'm not even going to get into one of the private companies that I help to manage. Commissioner West thinks that, if you look at the sneak preview ad that he paid for and published in the sneak preview that just came out a couple of days ago, he says, "I'm trying to take over all of county timberland." Well, no, we just put in our private company, one of the private companies that I helped to manage. We put in an application that would have generated more revenues for county justice systems and the county veterans department, and would have helped made their timberland more productive. And they, and it wouldn't have been at any cost to the county. And because I haven't been a past political supporter of his, he didn't even give that application a second look. So basically, group after group, if you don't share the political ideology of Commissioner John West, you can't do business in Josephine County. And that's not what local government in Josephine County needs to do, or anywhere in Oregon for that matter. Local government in Josephine County, by its charter, both city and county, is nonpartisan, and it shouldn't matter what your political ideology is. If you want to do business in Josephine County, you have to follow the rules in terms of the commissioner's decisions, or everybody has to play by the same rules. And time after time, if you don't follow the political ideology of Commissioner West, you can't do business in Josephine County, and that's just that's not what the county voters voted for, and time again. And cutting back, not following the law in making these decisions, affecting the health and safety of the community. And Commissioner West might say he's a fan of law enforcement, but what he actually does is he's hurting law enforcement. And that's the biggest responsibility of local government in Oregon, is to provide for, public safety and law enforcement and the justice system. That's the core of what government does. And these decisions are negatively impacting our safety. And, it's time that he got a mid-year review.
Keep it going again. Yeah. So how are you guys doing on your numbers? Are you expecting to get the numbers that you're looking for to get this on the ballot?
Yeah, we do. This has been incredibly popular. The support that we've gotten from thousands and thousands of county residents has been really overwhelming. I've been following local government happenings for 15 years now, mm-hmm. and I haven't seen many local political measures that are quite as popular as this one, to be frank. So okay. We do expect. There's a lot of signatures to gather in a very short time frame. Recalls are very hard to do, but so far, everything points to we will be getting enough signatures, and this will be on the ballot later this year. So, okay. Look forward to sharing more information as time goes on if you want to do another one of these.
Sure. So off the camera, John had mentioned that he would be interested, if you guys were both open to it, to having an open discussion, kind of debate forum sort of thing with the Oregon Grape, and we'd be happy to facilitate it. I told him I would only be interested in doing it if the recall went through, so that then before people vote on the ballot, they have a chance chance to kind of hear you guys both to discuss both problems. And the reason that I would be interested in hosting it is because, there's a lot of stuff that I'm not going to understand or be able to, like you said, there's a lot of minutia in here. So I thought it might be nice to have both parties to be able to discuss that on their own. Is that something either of you guys would be interested in doing if we hosted it?
Absolutely.
Lily, you as well.
We should wait and see. We need to make sure it is going to the ballot.
I was thinking after if it actually got on the ballot. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I told one of our core group members the exact same thing. I said we should have it. We should have a debate. We should. We should have some direct back and forth.
In a way, I was thinking there's no reason that just because we're small local government that you shouldn't have the same opportunities to hear this kind of open discussion of ideas between people. So
I mean, there are facts that back all of our petition points, and unfortunately, a number of false statements made in response to our petition. And so, I would absolutely welcome the opportunity to have face-to-face and confront those, because you have your right to your own opinion, but you don't have your right to your own facts.
Yeah, I love that quote. Yeah. Lily, was that something you would be interested in, or?
Yeah, let's see where we go, and depends on where it is and the time frame and all that kind of stuff. So.
I was thinking we'd do something different than this setup. We would probably honestly build a set for it and, see if we could do something that, at least halfway competes with NBC or, something that would look nice, Yeah.
Yeah, as long as hey, I look forward to debating Commissioner West directly, because we've got facts in our corner.
Okay, awesome. I love it. I really appreciate you guys being on. Yeah, this was a longer episode. I hope people were able to stay for the whole thing, because there's a lot of nuance here, and it's important to stay informed, because whether you like it or not, you live here in Josephine County, and all of this stuff matters. It affects your life, and so I'm glad that you guys came on here to discuss it. Really appreciate it.
And thanks again for the opportunity.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Awesome. Good to see you guys. Thank you.
Take care.